release of the. First of all, do you guys think the timing of the release of this movie is a little odd? The fact that it's in like March, like considering like all the other like Superman and Batman movies were like 4th of July type releases.
Well, I don't think they want.
to-
I don't think they want to deal with that the summer releases against some of the other movies that are coming out this year, right? What?
I mean, I don't know what's on the horizon for.
Well, I mean, you got
July. Is that Doctor
Captain America 3.
But that's like May. I think that took over the Avengers spot. And Captain America used to be in March.
X-Men's in May.
Oh, okay. So that's another.
And then
one.
Captain America.
I thought Captain America was like
I don't
that
remember
first
when Captain
like, Cinco de
America
Mayo
is.
weekend.
And
I could be
then
wrong.
either later this year or early next year is Suicide Squad.
Yeah. And this
I thought
year
that was August.
And this year you have what?
Then there you go. It's August.
You have like ID4 coming out this year. I mean, I don't.
I think that's probably why. I think that's
yeah.
probably why
I don't
didn't.
think they want to go up against. I mean, obviously, it's not. I doubt it's gonna be as big as this movie is.
Yeah.
But
Speaking of that, like I was watching Batman of Steel, like they had the Zod came through and he was like had his spaceship.
Yeah.
Like, why do they make every spaceship in every like sci-fi movie look like an animal? Like, have human beings ever made a spaceship that looks like an animal?
No.
Why? Because we wouldn't. So why do aliens do that?
That's
I
one
don't get that. It's
we
so
were-
dumb.
So we were watching Man of Steel last night to go watch Batman versus Superman today, and Kat commented on the fact that the Zod spaceship looks like a
Whale.
sea turtle.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That was perfect. So I was talking. I have this curiosity about you that I was wondering about when I was watching. I was telling Devo this earlier. The DC movies seem to be more concentrated on like the morality of what it takes to be a superhero, whereas a lot of the Marvel movies are more concentrated on like the character's personal journey. And there seems to be in DC like this narrative about like the idea of fighting crime or being a superhero or being like an other, so to speak. And you were saying this once about a lot about xenophobia, but you could replace that like with some other thing other than an alien,
Right.
And I was just curious, like why do you think that DC is going this route, whereas Marvel just kind of chooses not to?
But I think it's always been a theme of DC.
Yeah.
To be that type of person, where it's the morality of how far of a superhero will you go before you become something past the superhero and like become a villain.
Right.
Marvel never really cared about that. There was always the heroes that never went that far. But there was
Yeah.
always the heroes that always went that far. Wolverine is on the cusp of that one.
Anti-hero.
An anti-hero. Punisher obviously didn't even care.
Super anti-hero.
Super anti-hero. And it's funny because Spider-Man is on the other side of that. He will not go past that barrier.
And same with Cap.
Same with Cap. They're superheroes. And it's funny because when you meet these anti-heroes, right? And Hulk is a strange one because Hulk is ambiguous to both when he's Hulk.
It's almost like it's not his fault what happens. It's not him. He's not choosing to do
He's
it.
ambiguous to both, Because he'll eventually learn that he's doing something bad, but while he's doing the good stuff, he does a lot of bad stuff. It only takes a while. It takes a while for him to understand that he's destroying a whole city
Yeah.
to stop, whoever he's trying to stop at the time, So he's ambiguous to that, to the superhero villain dichotomy of everything. But with DC, I think the superheroes. I think Batman's the only one that's even come close to that the anti-hero, and really he really isn't.
I mean, not in the movies. He's kind of not, but like when you compare him to the rest of the Justice League,
When you compare to, and in reality, the only time where he actually goes over it is when it's in the Frank Miller comic book, where it becomes the Dark Knight,
Right. Yeah.
But for the most part, he's the detective. He solves crime as the Bat.
What do you guys think of this idea as like the symbol? They talked about a lot of this in Batman, where it's like there's a symbol to fight crime, where kind of like the idea that like a man can be killed, a man can be destroyed, but if you create this symbol, like for instance, you have I know Batman's really only been Bruce Wayne, but you have like the Green Lantern can be anybody. Whatever. You have these other characters that can continue to be these characters, but they're not the original guy, but you still have that symbol.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think is pretty interesting in Batman, at least in that Batman universe, is that the symbol doesn't really die. And at least in the comics, like when Bruce Wayne has died or has gone away, but Batman stays.
Yeah.
So somebody else can take up the cowl. Dick Grayson's been Batman.
Yep.
So at least with DC and this is something they kind of tried to do with the death of Superman when Superman first died.
Yeah.
They had Superboy, Steel,
That weird,
some weird cyborg thing.
yeah, that other alien one or something.
Yeah.
It was a half. It was the cyborg one was
Yeah,
the one
the
that was a half.
the
one.
half
that looked
one.
exactly like Clark Kent, but
Yeah.
had like half of him was metal.
Yeah, and
They
but there were like 4 interpretations of Superman, and they were all trying to be the new Superman, and it was a story arc for however long until Superman came back
Yeah.
to life. So it's interesting that they don't really do that in Marvel. Like, I mean, technically, Iron Man. Rhodes has been Iron Man before. Like, he's been Iron Man.
Yeah.
When Tony Stark was too much of a drunk and he stepped
Yeah.
away, James Rhodes came in to be Iron Man for a while, and then
What about Spider-Man? There's been other Spider-Mans, or it's all been Peter Parker.
been Spider-Man, but there have been different dimensions.
Yeah, it's funny because like what Diva was saying, like there was in the late '90s there was a series of comic books that were like the 2099 comic books, where there was like Spider-Man 2099,
Yeah.
Punisher 2009. They weren't. It wasn't Frank Castle.
And it wasn't Peter Parker.
But they still showed that it was like the Spider-Man symbol, and it
Yeah.
was still the Punisher symbol. So in that sense, what you're saying is that the symbol themselves. They don't explain that the symbol was there before. I don't think they ever brought that up.
No.
But that it continued on that symbol, that spider symbol, was going to be Spider-Man,
Yeah,
and that the skull with the elongated jaw
was
Punisher.
and they did the same thing with the Avengers. So there's
Yes.
Avengers 2099. And I want to say something along the lines of whomever was the new Captain America was Steve Rogers' daughter.
Yeah,
or
I
granddaughter.
remember that. It
or
was like
something.
it was like a relative of Steve
Yeah,
Rogers.
and then there was X-Men 2099, but that was completely
Yeah.
unrelated to the X-Men.
Yeah.
Like, it was just a whole brand new set of mutants that were following the studies of Charles Xavier, if I'm remembering correctly.
But I mean, they still use the X. You know,
Right,
it's hard.
yeah,
the
yeah,
X is hard, kind of hard, dude. Obviously, because
Right.
X Force used the same X. There was X Force. What was the other
X-Factor.
X Factors? They still use the X.
Excalibur, but they didn't use an X. But the point being that the symbol is more important in the DC universe
yeah.
as opposed to Marvel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, they're kind of starting to touch on that in Marvel because I think they see how it works in DC. So like Wolverine, right? His daughter is X-23 is the new Wolverine, so she's wearing his costume and all that stuff. You know, they don't have hey, here's Cyclops, but
It's not Scott Summers.
it's John Benjamin who's the new Cyclops, you know.
Oh.
But you can have somebody wearing the Spider-Man or the Superman logo and they're still Superman.
Yeah,
Somebody being underneath the cowl, it's still Batman.
it's still
You
Batman.
know, same thing with Green Lantern. You can have Jon Stewart, who is the opposite color of Hal Jordan, and he's still Green Lantern.
Yeah.
You know, symbolism is much more important in DC than it is in Marvel, and I think it's pretty interesting because, at least for a storyteller, the world's your oyster at that
Yeah,
point.
it's way more open at
Yeah,
that point because
yeah.
Spider-Man, unfortunately, Peter Parker, he ain't a black dude. He ain't a big Latin guy. No, he's a skinny.
There was a Latin Spider-Man.
There
There is,
was,
yeah.
Yeah.
there was,
Miles
but
Morales.
but Peter Parker is a skinny, light-skinned individual named Peter Parker. Whether it be him, his real name might be Juan Mendoza. My friend Juan, whatever. He could be Peter. He's a light skin. He's not very thin, but he is light
Yeah,
skin.
you get in shape. Well,
Yeah, he gets, yeah.
You get ripped
But
up.
in the show or in the movie, his name is Peter Parker. It may be Peter Parker, but it's Peter Parker.
So my other this idea that like the super and there's a movie Reign of Fire. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there's a movie Reign of Fire out there with Gerard Butler, Christian Bale, incidentally enough. And in that movie, it's basically like the world has been destroyed by dragons, and they have this thing where they're like acting out this play basically for these kids, and they're showing them like a story, but that story becomes like a myth to them. Like they don't know what, I mean, they say it never happened, but little kids believe whatever they believe, and they tell their parents whatever they're telling. It's like, how do we know that the Odyssey happened? You know what I mean? Like we're just seeing some dude that wrote it like hundreds of years after it happened, and he's hearing it from hearsay. It's like if someone saw like 2,000 years from now, they saw the movie Troy, and that's all they ever knew about what the Odyssey was, they would think that's what it is. But you have this idea that like Star Wars or Marvel or DC
to put it
are
in
a
context,
modern
scene,
myth.
To put it in context, the scene that they're playing out in Reign of Fire happens to be a gentleman clad in black with a bright red sword versus a young hero with a bright blue sword, and they're reenacting the scene from The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. And he's saying like, Luke, I am your father and all this, right? And it basically becomes their, you know, their creation myth to an extent. And this phenomenon of superheroes and this phenomenon of like creating these larger than life people, they're not real, but people created the gods. People created Hercules, these half deities characters, and we've done that with these people. Whether or not the person really exists is inconsequential. It matters what the character means, what the character does, the moral that the character teaches. And I'm just curious what you guys think about, especially being comic book aficionados. This idea that like the comic book superhero has become what we idolize, has become what we view as the ideal for a person. You know, and like it's our myth. If in 100 years, if someone in 100 years after, if our world's been destroyed and all they have is a comic book of Superman, they might think that that's our Bible.
Yeah. I agree.
And
I agree.
how do they interpret us?
It's funny because I remember watching a documentary. I remember I can't the lady's name, and she actually mentioned what you said. She's all, 100 years ago, books were our release. It was our imagination. We read books, we wrote it down, and these books were our movies. Now, 1973, and she brought this whole thing up. What if someone saw, like, there was a video of Star Wars, 1,000 years from now?
Right.
Could you imagine someone playing Star Wars 1,000 years from now, thinking, and they're like us, and they're thinking
it's real.
They think it was real. That they thought they might think that's what we were doing now, and in reality, it was just fantasy.
Yeah.
And when you bring it back up, and I'd hope people can would realize that comic books are just fantasy and they're not, and maybe people don't.
To tell some of the people at the cons that.
I understand that, but I mean, I'd hope that they do realize that, and they don't make Wolverine a real person.
There's some people out there that probably are trying to be. That's the crazy part.
I understand, but it's not someone that can take a bullet to the chest and just
regenerate
and stuff,
Right.
And I'm not saying that there's not people skilled out there that can be as badass as he is, but he's not obviously can get shot. But and I agree with you. The perception that we leave as a civilization to our future selves, we're talking about our children's, and that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Is will they see our comic books, that record, over the record that the historians actually leave?
Because it's not as exciting.
Exactly. What will they choose to believe? Will they choose to believe what's happening now in politics in a political view of the world? Or will they view, Captain America 3 Civil War as the truth? Which I hope they're smart enough not to believe that Captain America, the movie that's being released
But what if there becomes this sort of like melding of like the people that are alive now that are actually making the decisions or doing the things when they become ascribed to or associated with some like superhero, and then it becomes like the narrative for like our modern world, because it's easy enough to write a story about Achilles and like some Trojan War and he's just some dude in a battle, but it's another thing when you write that he's the son of the son of a deity and a man, and that he's calling upon the gods to create him special armor and stuff like that, and they're fighting and it matters and Zeus cares and all these other things. Like when you start ascribing these things to think, well, then at what point does it become myth or reality? And ostensibly for people believing these types of things hundreds of years in the future, there may not be a difference. I mean,
I agree with you, because this is a theological view. It's like, why don't we continue seeing, what happened in the Odyssey as truth. Like people think the Bible happens in the Bible. I'm not going to knock on people what happened in the Bible. What you believe is what you believe. But what's the difference between Achilles going against Hector, and David versus Goliath? There's no difference. There's one person fighting someone else in an epic battle for good against evil, whatever you want to look at it. And what is the difference?
Because now it's gotten
How
to
do
the
you
point
view it?
now where everything's so gray. At least, I mean, maybe it's always been gray, but we're at the point now where we can see how gray it is. There's no like propaganda telling us that it's this or that.
Exactly.
We see somewhat of more of the truth than was seen then, and we see that everything's gray, and it's not so easy
I just
to
hope that
identify.
people would view it as what it is maybe. Man,
Like it's just fun. It's just
fun. That's what I would hope. I mean, maybe I don't even know what Plato.
Well, I'm
and all
saying
of
say
that.
there's no more like in Rain of Fire. There's no more books.
Right.
There's none of these things around,
Yeah.
and you have to teach the young people of the future. It's more important to teach them how to be, how to act, what the moral should be, the type of person they should be. Are you going to teach them the Bible? Or are you going to teach them Star Wars? What's an easier way to explain to them? Like there's no books. There's no one to prove any of this.
Yeah.
You're just trying to raise a young person. Like,
Yeah.
what's an easier way? Probably Star Wars is probably an easier way. And we're probably more familiar with it than the complexity of the Bible. You know what I mean? And I don't know how I don't know what catechism's like. I don't know how they explain it to little kids and stuff
Right.
like that, but you got a good point.
No,
you
I
know?
agree.
Catalysm?
Catalysm.
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 Let's
man.
call back to the past right there.
All right, my last thing that I have a question for you guys is okay. There's this idea, and then I saw this in Batman and The Dark Knight Rises. There's this idea that like, and there's always been this idea that like the villain, especially the supervillain, is like this uncompromising figure, this remorseless figure. Like especially the Joker is like the poster boy for this. Like I was telling even these guys, I'm looking up on Wikipedia. It says the first thing it says, the Joker is a serial killer. That's what he is.
Yeah.
It's what he does. He revels in this, right? And he doesn't care. The Joker never shows remorse, right? And a lot of these other evil characters like Thanos or whoever have you, they don't show remorse. They don't care.
Right.
But then you have these characters like even the way they portrayed Bane in the Dark Knight Rises, where at the very end he was crying because he realized how much he loved Talia al Ghul,
yeah.
and that like just being there for her, it didn't even matter what happened. Just the fact that he was there for her was
Yeah.
all that mattered to him, and it like brought him to tears. Or even the fact, and then there's also the Joker in the way that like the Joker is this character who has no remorse, but he knows he's not as powerful. He knows he's weaker, but
Yeah.
he finds other ways to win. And so like there's these two dichotomous things, there's two different aspects to like a villain that like I don't know, like it's something. Do you see that in Marvel? Or is it like a DC specific thing?
I don't know. Like, I see it a little bit in Magneto because he's very, very much pro mutant, wanting to push the mutant race, but at the same time, he's so close to Charles Xavier as his best friend that there's kind of like that drawing to his personal morality.
Like I agree with you. I think Charles Xavier is Magneto's humanity. That's what it shows.
But you look at a lot of the other villains
like-
in Marvel, and I don't know.
They're just pure evil, right?
No, because
especially with Galactus and all these other types.
Galactus is omnipotent. It's.
But I mean, these evil characters, these
I think
and all, they're just uncompromising, remorseless.
Carnage is uncompromising, remorseful. He's a serial killer.
Yeah. Venom is probably because he's become an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Doom is just someone that wants power. So he may be evil, but he'd rather enslave than kill.
Right.
With Dr. Doom.
Yeah.
Kingpin is just a criminal under
He's a crime boss.
He's a crime boss. He
Yeah.
wants power.
Yeah.
He doesn't really need to. If he has to kill people, he will. But if he doesn't have to, he won't. Kingpin's a huge. Don't get me wrong. Kingpin is a huge bad guy in the Marvel universe. by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Kingpin's
yeah.
huge. Green Goblin went crazy. He does kill without.
I think
remorse.
he's a revenge kind of guy.
he's a
right?
revenge kind of
Yeah.
character. He won't have to kill.
I'm not
Invincible.
saying that DC doesn't have characters like
you're trying to-
because Darkseid, Doomsday, they're just pure evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Characters
right,
like that.
right.
But it seems like DC, like the main villains, are ones that have these sort of
that
aspects
no
to them.
matter what, they're evil.
No, that DC has these characters that are like vulnerable in some way.
Oh.
Either they're like physically weak, or they find some other way in which to attack the main character, or they're like emotionally have like scars.
Well, for the most part, for DC, is that they're just like the superhero counterparts, that they're human.
Yeah, a lot of them.
And most of them are, and you got like, other than what's that, the
Darkseid.
Darkseid, he's
Yeah.
and
Thanos,
yeah, but they're human. You got Scarecrow is a human, Joker's a human, Mr. Freeze is a human, and they're just humans that got either scarred somewhere, but that's why it's that human part of them will always stay. Except for Joker. Joker is a psychopath.
But he doesn't have any strength. He can't overpower it, and he knows it. And he uses it for other
that's
advantage.
why
Like, what Marvel villain do you think is out there that is weak, knows he's weak, but uses other things to save the day? Because I'm trying to find a Marvel hero, and it's really
Kingpin does that. Kingpin knows that he's weak.
Kingpin has some superhuman strength. Like, not like superhuman strength in the sense that where like he's going to be like tossing cars and stuff like that, but he's stronger than your normal average human.
He's in a bat away Daredevil, because he does. He bats away Punisher because they're normal humans in that sense. So he can do that. But
Sure.
Spider-Man, he tries to bat at Spider-Man. Spider-Man does a flip around his arm.
True.
And like shoots a spider web in his face.
As he does. Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying, Clan.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's something what DC does different than Marvel, and
Yeah.
something that Marvel does different than DC.
Yeah.
Do you guys think a mask really, or like some disguise really works in real life? Like Clark Kent has his glasses, and somehow people don't think it's him, or Batman wears a mask. Somehow people don't think it's him. Do you think that stuff really would work? I mean, the alter ego thing is a big DC thing. It's not as big in Marvel.
I want to say no, and that's why they're starting to do more things with Batman's voice. Because in the past, it was just like, oh, hey, I'm Batman. I have got a mask on. And now, hey, I'm Bruce Wayne. I don't have a mask on. But now it's like, I'm Batman.
Yeah, it's true.
And then
Everyone always clowns on it, but I'm like, what else
I
is
take my
gonna
mask
do?
off, and now I'm Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
But like, even same thing in this movie. Like, what's interesting is that in the new movie, it's Bruce. You're introduced to Bruce Wayne, and then you see him as Batman, but you don't hear him at first. And then you see him in the Batcave, and then Alfred's working on this mask, and then there's a microphone on there, and the microphone is a little messed up, and so he gets this kind of like, do you bleed, kind of like robotic voice, and so that kind of explains why he's got this voice. But they try to find other ways to now they're starting to try to find other ways to mimic the identity. And one thing that I really liked about the Green Lantern movie is when he had the mask on, his eyes actually turned white, and for me, like, that, I mean, you look at his face. I mean, we know it's Ryan Reynolds, but putting on the mask and then turning his eyes white, it just had that one little extra kind of way to hide the identity.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, are there Marvel heroes that that have alter egos? That try to, I mean, I know Peter Parker, obviously, but any of the other Marvel heroes that actually it's part of their character is having an alter ego and like making sure that the people that they love are like protected because they're like a human.
Peter Parker, I think, really is the only one. I mean,
Bruce Banner, I guess, but he's not really trying to.
I think a lot
Bruce Banner doesn't try.
Right. I think a lot of that is the fact that Banner is more either afraid or ashamed of the Hulk, as opposed to like, and when he is trying to save other people, he leaves the country. Like he'll flee. Like, he's not like, oh, I'm walking around as Bruce Banner. He's like, I'm going to go to the most remote places possible to save the people I love.
What about Logan?
That fool just walks around as Logan.
Yeah, but he's not wearing his suit.
No, it's funny.
No, but he's just a Canadian who's smoking
Because every so often, that fool will just be in his suit and he just take off his cowl.
Yeah.
And not give a damn.
Yeah.
Logan?
Yeah.
He
He'll
doesn't
be
care.
Wolverine. He'll just take off his cowl and not give a damn, right?
Yeah.
Because it's Logan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's him. He
And then
doesn't
it's like,
care.
the thing is
But
with
there's
Marvel,
like I know Captain Marvel wears a mask to hide her identity.
now that I think about it, I know She-Hulk.
Yeah.
It's weird because she can be, I think, just a normal human, and then she turns to the Hulk,
Yeah,
but
she
she's
got
like an attorney or something like that. So she's got kind of like the whole DC sort of, protect my identity sort of thing. Tony Stark, he outed himself as Iron Man,
Yeah,
so
he's
people
Iron Man,
know that he's Iron Man.
Yeah.
And Captain America is Captain America, whether or not he wears a mask or not. People
Yeah.
know that
But
he's
he doesn't
Captain
even
America.
And I think people know that he's Steve Rogers also. And,
Yeah, he knows-
and the
he
biggest
knows.
one was Peter Parker until Civil War. So one of the big staples of the Civil War comic was the fact that Peter Parker or Spider-Man revealed himself as Peter Parker.
Well, he's Daredevil. Daredevil is that. Daredevil is the
there you go.
blind
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
He
Okay,
wears the
Daredevil's
cowl.
one. Yeah.
Thor.
But Daredevil's the Red Batman. You know,
Thor has an alter ego.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot what his name is.
I don't know, but he's blind too. He's a blind with a cane.
he's like a no, he's not blind. He's like a doctor or a surgeon.
As
or
a
something.
doctor, I did not know. They didn't include this at all in the movie.
Yeah.
All I know is that he was blind with a cane. The ones I read again, the cane turns into the Mjolnir because no matter what, he has to have like a walking stick with him. I think maybe that's but he always has to walk because the walking stick turns into Mjolnir.
Yeah, no. Now that I think about it, I think his character, the doctor, had like he wasn't able to like support himself, so he did have
a walking
a cane
stick
or something.
turns into Mjolnir. So that's Thor's another one.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very different approach to the superhero idea.